It's 1 o'clock. This is Seamus McKee with Newsbreak. 30 minutes of news and comment from home and abroad. First, the headlines.
The mother of the 17-year-old Belfast youth who was murdered last night has called for an end to all killings here. The Ulster Unionist MP John Taylor says politicians here are so divided that Unionists and Nationalists would be better off having separate talks with the Prime Minister. The Hong Kong businessman, said to be a key witness in an investigation into alleged bribery involving immigrants, has lost his fight against deportation.
And also on Newsbreak, the mother of the Catholic teenager murdered in Belfast last night says the killing won't stop her trying to build bridges between the Protestant and Catholic communities. From Westminster, what the party leaders have been saying about the local government election results, being viewed as the biggest indicator so far on how the nation will vote at a general election. And from Dublin, the SDLP leader John Hume on his meeting today with the Taoiseach Mr Haughey. But first, the news in full from Judith Rebick.
Police have said they believe the murder of a 17-year-old Catholic youth in South Belfast last night was sectarian. Gary McCartan was shot dead by several gunmen who forced their way into his home on the Ormeau Road. They escaped in a blue Vauxhall Cavalier which had been hijacked earlier in the Shankill Road. The youth's mother, Mrs Joyce McCartan, said her son had planned to marry in September and had not been involved with any paramilitary organisations. She appealed for an end to all killings in the province.
I'd like to ask the ones that done it, why a child of 17? I think it's time that the people stood up and said, stop, we want no more. And we'll never get peace until that happens.
In Belfast last night, 2 men were injured in what police are describing as horrific attacks. The first man was driving down Boucher Road when he was hijacked. Petrol was thrown at his face and set alight. On Donegal Road, 3 men beat up another man at his home using steel bars and pickaxe handles. The Ulster Unionist Euro MP John Taylor says politicians here are so divided that they could never reach an agreement at round-table talks. Speaking within the past hour on the Radio Ulster programme Talkback, Mr Taylor said that even if the Anglo-Irish agreement was suspended, Unionists and Nationalists would be better off having separate talks with the Prime Minister.
I think that this call for inter-party talks by various church leaders and representatives of business and commerce in this province are being unrealistic. You will not get any inter-party agreement in Northern Ireland today. The situation has become so divided and embittered, and political leaders, be they Jim Molyneux, Ian Paisley, John Hume or Seamus Mellon, whoever they are on so many hooks, political hooks, that they could not extract themselves to reach an agreement. The Unionists must enter into talks with Mrs Thatcher and the government. The SDLP must do the same. I think that'll be a more fruitful way of bringing about a settlement, rather than have the Unionists and the SDLP sitting around a table, because I don't believe they could ever reach an agreement.
The SDLP West Belfast councillor Alex Atwood has called for an inquiry into RUC behaviour during the funeral earlier this week of IRA man Finbar McKenna. Councillor Atwood said television evidence suggested that the police had acted in a heavy-handed fashion, firing plastic bullets in a confined space in breach of regulations. He said the officers responsible must be questioned about why the police, as he put it, overreacted to stone throwing with the wild use of batons and aimless firing of plastic bullets. The Hong Kong businessman, who's said to be a key witness in a police investigation into alleged bribery involving immigrants, has lost his fight against deportation. A judge has ruled that the Home Office didn't act unfairly when deciding to deport Hock Chung Chang, who's been in Crumlin Road Jail since January as an illegal immigrant. Mr Chan's allegations led to the suspension of an officer in the RUC, and a subsequent police investigation has also involved an immigration official. One of Ireland's largest house builders has urged the government to strike the right balance between the needs for homes in Belfast and what he calls the public preference for the development of the suburbs. Fred Fraser said that while recognising the need to revitalise inner cities, he says a substantial number of people still preferred to live outside the city.
We have a lot of enthusiasm, as a government have, for inner city development, but we in private sector housing see the main problem of scarcity of sites in the suburbs where people really want to live. At the moment, there's virtually no land around the Belfast stop line at all. We're all waiting anxiously for the publication of the Belfast Urban Area Plan within the next month or two. and we hope that government will get the balance right. In other words, that there will be a release of substantial greenfield sites round the outskirts of the city, as well as a release of land for housing in the inner city.
The Macrofelt building firm Henry Brothers Limited have denied carrying out work at Dungannon Courthouse. Yesterday, the IRA, in admitting responsibility for a grenade attack on the courthouse, alleged it was part of what they called their campaign against Henry Brothers, who they said were working at the building. This morning, a spokesman for Henry Brothers said the firm are not engaged in any building work at Dungannon Courthouse. For the third year in succession, Shorts have received a special award from the Boeing Aircraft Company for the quality and delivery of their components. It's the sixth time in the last 10 years that Shorts have won Boeing's Pride in Excellence Award. Boeing is the world's largest civil aircraft manufacturer and has close connections with Shorts. Commenting on the award, Shorts chairman, Sir Philip Foreman, said it was a great honour for the Belfast firm. A worker at a Carrickfergus meat plant has told an industrial tribunal in Belfast that he sprayed boiling water from a power hose against a female colleague's bottom for a joke. The incident happened on June the 18th last year at North Shore Meatpackers. The woman, who was badly burned, is claiming she was a victim of sexual harassment. The man said he could see no sexual connotation in the incident and he thought she would have taken it as a joke. Afterwards, he said he saw the woman crying in the tea room. The hearing continues. The cost of borrowing has been reduced again. Following a signal from the Bank of England, the major banks have cut their base rates from 9.5% to 9%. The move, the fourth cut this year, brings base rates to their lowest for 3 years. Share prices have also risen to record levels on the stock exchange, encouraged by the local election results. Dominic Harrod reports.
The cut in interest rates, bringing a fall of 2 points in 2 months, was widely expected. It'll be welcome to industry and commerce, which had been seeking lower rates for months. And while the building societies say this cut alone won't be enough for a second mortgage rate cut this year, any further drop might be. If the authorities waited until after the local elections to authorise the cut in rates the city expected, their consent this morning added fuel to the view in the city that the results signal an early victory for the government in a general election.
A general election next month now looks even more likely after the results. Counting's still going on in some areas, but most of the results are in. The Conservatives did better than expected, winning control of 17 councils and losing 14. The government has published a discussion document on the use of video recordings in the trials of alleged child abusers. It's aimed at saving children the fear and distress they can suffer when giving evidence in the presence of an alleged attacker. That's the news. Now back to Seamus McKee.
The mother of the Catholic teenager who was murdered at his Belfast home last night has today made an emotional plea for an end to the killings. Police believe that 17-year-old Gary McCartan from the Ormeau Road was the victim of sectarian gunmen. He was the father of a 3-month-old baby and was due to be married in September. His mother, Joyce McCartan, has been instrumental in setting up women's groups throughout Northern Ireland in both Catholic and Protestant areas. Those groups have brought friendships between women of both religions in a non-sectarian way. And this morning, as police continued their investigations into the murder, Mrs. McCartan spoke to Maggie Taggart. Could she think of any reason why her son was shot?
No reason at all. My son was a good lad. He was getting married in September. He's 18 in July, and he wasn't involved in any paramilitaries. And you know, speaking my heart, and I can't understand it. And I hope the men that done it's listening in. I'm asking them why. To come to my face and tell me why they killed my child. And you know, my heart goes out to anybody in Northern Ireland today. There's the policemen's wives, the soldiers' mothers, and all civilians. They feel the way I feel, and we're fed up with it. Not just me, but as women from both sides of the community. They're just getting browned off. When we get up in the morning, all we think of is to get our day in. We're not interested in politics. We try to, build up something good, for rear our family in peace and give them an education and have enough to live on. That's all we want out of life. Not this murdering in here. I could live with anybody. And I have friends on both sides of the community.
Because you've been trying to spread that message through Catholic and Protestant women's groups.
Yes, we are coming together on the important things in life, our needs here in the communities. And there's nothing wrong with that. We don't want gunmen in our area. We want a bit of peace. And I'm sure when I'm saying that, I'm speaking from both sides of the community, because the majority of people on both sides of the community, we're fed up. We've had it up to here. And what are we going to do about it? Are we going to let this go on day in, day out? The day it's my son, will it be some of their sons next day? You know?
What do you think will be the response from all the women you've worked with in loyalist areas?
Well, knowing them, they're good women. And I have great respect for them. We respect one another's religion. And, you know, religion doesn't come into it. We're human beings, and we have to have thought and care for one another. And when you've cared for somebody else outside your family home, that's half your battle.
Does this murder of your son discourage you from your task of trying to unite women?
No, it doesn't make me hate. God help the ones that done it. I pity them. They need treatment, because anybody would shoot a 17-year-old child with a machine gun. No, they've yet to make a maker. And to me, I don't hate nobody. Hate destroys, and I don't believe in destroying. I believe in building up constructively, you know, and make a better life for the rest of my family. Nobody will make me hate my friends on both sides of the community.
Mrs. Joyce McCartan speaking to Maggie Taggart. If anything more were needed to convince Tories that Mrs. Thatcher will declare a June election, it will have been provided by the results of yesterday's local government elections. The Tory performance was sufficient to prompt the party chairman, Norman Tebbit, to declare this morning that Conservatives were on target for what he called another terrific victory in the general election, but he wouldn't be drawn on the likely date. Meanwhile, the Alliance and Labour have been enlarging on the results, which have been widely described as disastrous for Labour and falling short of Alliance ambitions. Viv Robbins of the BBC's Parliamentary unit has been listening to what the various parties have had to say, and she joins me now. First, Viv, what has Mrs. Thatcher herself been saying about these results?
Well, not a great deal, but we understand that, in fact, she did hear the results into the night with some satisfaction, it's been said, which is probably a bit of an understatement. That's what we know about her reaction. And, of course, as you said, Mr. Tebbit was talking about paving the way for a terrific victory. And, indeed, he seemed to be hinting that there were advantages in ending this period of what he called electionitis, hinting perhaps that June was, after all, the chosen date.
Well, in the cold light of day, was Labour's mood any better about the results?
Well, I think you can say that after the votes have been cast, the propaganda war begins in a way, because going first to the Alliance conference and then to Labour, you'd almost get the impression that both had won. They were obviously seeking to put the best possible gloss on things, and in fact they used an identical phrase. David Owen said that you couldn't ask for a better launching pad for a general election than these figures provided, and indeed Brian Gould for Labour said an identical thing. He said this was a solid and encouraging launching pad for Labour's general election campaign.
How did he justify that?
Well, he said both he and John Cunningham, who of course is the Shadow Environment Minister, Secretary, said that the results were disappointing, but they insisted that they were not despondent, and they were, of course, were at pains to point out that Labour entered these elections as the strongest party in local government, with the strongest position in their history, and they've emerged still with the largest share of local councils in the country.
I understand that Labour has also predicted a much smaller majority for the Conservatives in a general election based on these local government results than any of the opinion polls had suggested.
Well, they've done a rather interesting thing, in fact, using the general election, the last general election figures. They produced some figures at their press conference this morning, saying that Labour had been monitoring its performance in a representative sample of 16 target seats, the election battleground seats where Labour needs to do well. And it said that on the basis of more than 500,000 voters in these 16 seats, Labour is now running just 2% behind the Conservatives, saying Labour has put on 9 percentage points in these key targets since 1983.
Was there anything at the Alliance conference as to the effect that the particular voting patterns had between the parties?
Well, the Alliance, of course, were at pains to point out they, in fact, were the biggest winner from the elections all told. And they did say that this meant that they were now poised for major parliamentary gains. But it was interesting that, in fact, both Davids declined to put a precise figure on this. There was a brief mention of tactical voting by David Steele, who said that you couldn't really extrapolate from national figures, from local figures, to be absolutely sure of what the national picture would look like. And he mentioned tactical voting as one element in this which could upset things.
One last point, Viv. What do they seem to you to be thinking of as the likeliest election date?
Well, I think that Labour certainly were specific about June, and I think fairly confident of June the 11th, and the two Davids similarly were hinting that they thought an election was indeed imminent.
Viv Robbins, thank you. Well, joining me now is the electoral analyst, David Butler. David, can I ask you, first of all, to what extent are the parties justified in making forecasts about a general election on the basis of these local election results?
Well, it doesn't work too badly. In 1983, it was a pretty good indicator to Mrs. Thatcher that she should call an election. She called it, and she won by and large as expected. There were, of course, warnings about individual seats where the indicators were not justified a few weeks later. And I think this time we shall certainly find some people whose hopes have been raised or dampened by what happened yesterday, who won't get what they expected on, for good or ill, on June the 11th.
Well, I can understand the local election results being used as an indicator of the likely timing or the best timing for an election, but do they necessarily act as a guide to a general election result?
Well, I think there is a broad sweep. You've got to have some indicator, and election results are preferred to opinion polls. A great many more people vote. They're real votes. They're genuine judgments. I don't think they are exact imitations of what would happen if there was a general election. Some people are voting on local issues, but by and large, we do know that there are broad national sweeps in local elections, and a government goes up and down in popularity, and all the efforts of good local councils and bad local councils are not properly rewarded or punished. It is just the broad national sweep.
Well, to what extent is Labour justified then in claiming that on the basis of these results, the Tories could have a majority as small as 20 or so in an election?
Well, you can do the simple arithmetic, and BBC Newsnight and ITN just now have done their arithmetic. One came up with a majority of 30, and I think one came up with a majority of 40 for the Conservatives, on the assumption that everyone would vote in exactly the same way on the 11th of June that they voted on the 7th of May. That assumption obviously won't be fully justified, but it is a better indicator. More people are involved in that than any other indicator we've got.
Would the Alliance be justified in their apparent confidence?
Well, I think they're justified in spotting a number of places where they've done extremely well. On yesterday's vote, they would actually defeat Paul Channon in Southend West. They'd win Norman Sterris' seat, though he's not standing, in Chelmsford. They'd win Pendle up in Yorkshire. There were quite in the Pennines. There were quite a lot of places like this that would change hands on the basis of yesterday's vote. And I think all of us, as we comment on the election and look out for things on election night, will be influenced by the indication of good local support for the Alliance yesterday.
Well, David, if you were Mrs. Thatcher, would you be confirmed if confirmation was necessary in the determination to declare for June 11?
Well, if I was Mrs. Thatcher, I wouldn't feel I had any freedom whatsoever. But I certainly think nothing happened yesterday to make her have misgivings for having got herself committed to a June the 11th election. She certainly got herself committed to some days or some weeks ago.
David Butler, thank you for joining us. And hot on the heels of the election results, the cost of borrowing is coming down. The Bank of England has signalled a 0.5% cut in interest rates, bringing them down to 9%. It's the fourth cut this year, and now base rates are at their lowest for 3 years. Share prices also moved ahead on the stock markets this morning. Dealers were said to have been encouraged by the results of the local elections. Tom Maddox of the BBC's financial unit has been telling Tim Arnold why interest rates have been cut.
There's been intense pressure in the city for a reduction in interest rates. And the main reason is that the pound has been very, very strong on foreign exchange markets. In fact, the Bank of England has had to intervene to a considerable extent to stop the pound going up any higher. So really that's the main pressure. It would have probably happened a few days ago had it not been for the local elections, and the city wanted to get those results out of the way just to make sure that they were as good as they'd expected, and the city sees these results as giving the green light to an election, and the city thinks the Conservatives will win that election, so that's why they're happy to see interest rates coming down now.
Why exactly have we got a strong pound?
There's a number of reasons. Partly it's the fact that over the past few months the British economy has not in fact been doing too badly compared with a lot of others. And it's also partly that the pound has been the beneficiary from the crossfire that's been going on world foreign exchange markets between the dollar and the Japanese yen. And so rather the pound has been seen as a sort of safe haven for international funds, and that's really why it's been benefiting.
And this is the fourth cut in interest rates this year, isn't it?
I think it is, and in fact we may see yet more to come. There's a possibility of another 0.5% cut in interest rates, because even after today's cut the pound is still very strong, and dealers in the city are talking about perhaps another 0.5% cut, perhaps that will come sometime during the election campaign, if indeed that happens as we expect next month.
Does this mean that mortgage rates are going to come down too?
I'm afraid it doesn't immediately. The biggest building societies, the Halifax and the Abbey National, have said that this won't be enough to trigger off a cut so far as they're concerned. They'd rather see that extra 0.5% come off before they move, because they only just cut their interest rate 6 weeks ago. So really they're saying it's a little bit too soon to move once again.
That was Tom Maddox of the BBC's financial unit, and he was discussing the cost of borrowing coming down in the wake of the local election results. In Dublin this lunchtime, the SDLP leadership is meeting an Irish government team that includes the Taoiseach, Mr Hockey, the Foreign Minister Brian Linehan, and the Minister for Justice. It's the first such full-scale meeting since Fianna Fáil regained power in February. The SDLP delegation is led by John Hume and includes his deputy, Seamus Mellon. When I spoke to Mr Hume in Dublin a short time ago, I asked him first what was on the agenda for today's meeting.
Well, this is the first formal meeting that we've had with the government. We'll be meeting the Taoiseach and a number of his ministers today, and I'll be accompanied by Seamus Mellon, Eddie McGrady and Joe Hendren. I've had a couple of meetings, a couple of private meetings with the Taoiseach since the new government was formed, but this was the first formal meeting, and therefore I would take it that what we will do is just generally review the situation, and we will give the government an update of our view of the situation on the ground.
Well, may I take up with you a couple of very pertinent issues? Do you see this as an important meeting for the whole question of fair employment, given apparent differences between you on the McBride principles? Mr Hockey supports them. You appear to oppose them on the grounds they could be a disincentive to investment here.
Well, I think that there is I don't see that there's any difference of opinion. I have no questions about the McBride principles. His principles have made that very clear. I am concerned, and in fact we have proposed a much stronger set of principles ourselves in our recent submissions to the government. My concern is that the campaign, not the principle, the campaign in the United States is preventing jobs from coming in.
And is it your understanding that Mr Hockey supports that campaign?
Yeah, but unless we get jobs into areas like Newry and West Belfast and Derry and Strabane, areas of high unemployment, the best fair employment laws in the world won't have any effect on the situation unless we get inward investment. So what I've been asking our friends in the United States is to use their influence to encourage people to invest in areas of high unemployment, while we, through the Anglo-Irish Conference, ensure that fair employment legislation is brought in.
And is Mr Hockey with you on that?
Well, I would believe that the Irish government would support that point of view. In fact, I noted that following the recent Anglo-Irish Conference, while stressing the need for fair employment legislation, which we would support, the communiqué also suggested that both governments would work to prevent any obstacles to inward investment.
Will the SDLP be putting forward today what it would like to see the Irish government propose through the Anglo-Irish Conference in relation to the policing of funerals?
I think that you can take it that all current issues would be under discussion, but I don't think that it's been ever our practice in advance of a meeting to say in specific terms what we would be discussing. We will be reviewing the overall situation And of course, current issues would obviously be matters for discussion.
And that would include the policing of funerals?
The handling of funerals, yes.
Do we take it that this meeting marks the end of a period of what has been perceived as lack of understanding between Fianna Fáil and the SDLP?
Well, I don't know where that came from. I mean, I've met Mr. Haughey on a very regular basis, and while I've read those remarks in the press, that has never been what has been happening at meetings between us, which have always been extremely cordial and constructive meetings, and I don't see today's meeting being any different.
John Hume. Next to the United States, and Senator Gary Hart looks set to pull out of the race for the Democratic presidential nomination today. The world's media are converging on his hometown of Denver to hear an official announcement this evening. Hart's campaign managers have advised him to throw in the towel after allegations that he had an affair with Donna Rice, an actress from the Miami Vice television program. But as reporter Mark Thomas of the radio station KDEN in Denver has been telling us, Hart still denies anything immoral took place between him and Donna Rice.
He has flatly denied that he has had an affair with the actress. He has said that although Donna Rice was at his townhouse in Washington, there was nothing intimate going on between the two of them, and he said any allegations to that effect are flat lies.
But despite that, it appears that he's going to resign.
That's right. His standing in the polls has dropped severely in the last few days, and his support financially is starting to dry up nationwide. He can no longer make a go of it, his advisors feel, financially.
So it's the financial consideration really that's making him pull out?
Primarily, I would say so, yes.
Why has he chosen Denver to make this announcement?
Well, Denver is his hometown. He lives in a cabin in the mountains, not far from Denver. He was a senator from Colorado for 12 years, and he considers himself a Coloradan. He started his campaign here 25 days ago with an official announcement in the mountains west of Denver, and it seems that this would be an appropriate place for him to end his campaign as well.
Has he had much support from his hometown?
He has had a great deal of support from his hometown. I have not heard anybody say anything negative about him in Colorado. They are willing to believe that he did nothing wrong with Donna Rice, the actress, or either that if they are, they say that other presidents have had well-publicized affairs in the past and have still made very good presidents. Kennedy for one, Jefferson for another.
So who's likely to succeed him as the front-runner for the Democratic nomination?
At the moment, that's very unclear. There is nobody of the stature in the race right now. The obvious front-runner would be New York Governor Mario Cuomo, except Cuomo announced that he would not run because Hart was running. Now that Hart has pulled out, one wonders if Cuomo will announce that he is running again. In the standings in the New Hampshire primary, which is the first primary in the United States, Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis looks very strong.
Is he clean?
To the best of our knowledge, yes.
Mark Thomas of the radio station KDEN in Denver. And just to remind you that Senator Hart is due to give a press conference in about 4 hours' time, at which is expected to say that he is no longer seeking the Democratic presidential nomination. The weather forecast: the early part of the afternoon will be bright and it will remain sunny for a while in the east, but later cloud will increase and a little light rains expected in the northwest this evening. The temperature around 17 Celsius this afternoon will fall to between 3 and 6 overnight. And the main stories again: the mother of the 17-year-old Belfast youth who was murdered last night has called for an end to all killings here. Gary McCartan was shot dead by gunmen who burst into his home on the Ormeau Road. The police say it was sectarian. The Ulster Unionist Euro MP John Taylor says politicians here are so polarised they could never reach agreement, even if the Anglo-Irish agreement was suspended. An SDLP councillor in West Belfast, Alex Atwood, has accused the police of overreacting during the funeral of IRA man Finbar McKenna earlier this week. He's called for an inquiry into the use of plastic bullets. A Hong Kong businessman is said to be a key witness in a police investigation into alleged bribery involving immigrants has lost his fight against deportation. Hong Chung Chan has been in Crumlin Road jail since January as an illegal immigrant. 2 men are recovering in hospital from what police describe as horrific attacks in Belfast. One had petrol thrown in his face and set alight. The other was beaten with steel bars and pickaxe handles. A general election next month now looks even more likely after the results of yesterday's elections. Counting's still going on in some areas, but most of the results are in. The Conservatives did better than expected, winning control of 17 councils and losing 14. The big banks are again cutting the cost of borrowing. After a signal from the Bank of England this morning, they announced they were cutting their base rates from 9.5% to 9%. It's the 4th cut in interest rates this year, and it means that rates are now at their lowest level for 3 years. And the government has published a discussion document on the use of video recordings in the trials of alleged child abusers. It's aimed at saving children the fear and distress they can suffer when giving evidence in the presence of an alleged attacker. That's the news this lunchtime. Good afternoon.